to Asif Arif, an attorney and author specializing in Islam. Luc mentioned there the backlash against the Muslim community in France. Tell us more about that.
I mean, when you see the last year, you can see that there was a rise of Islamophobia. And at the same time, there were some Muslims who are trying to do whatever they can. For example, when we see Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray, what happened in this church, Muslims were gathered in a big mass of Muslims gather in the church in order to show that we are here with our French fellows. And on the other hand, you also have, when these attacks of November happened, right after we voted some bills, there was already the loi sur le renseignement, surveillance law. And then after there has been the l'état d'urgence, the state of emergency, and the state of emergency who has been reformed right before the Paris attack. So all these issues raised some concern in population, some legitimate concern as well, because people were thinking, who are these people who are going to attack France? But at the same time, Muslim people were in their home, but they were waiting for government to help them in order to reinsure their civil liberties.
I just want to bring it back in, Karen, our clinical psychologist on set. This kind of cycle of hate, really, like blaming ordinary French people, blaming the Muslim community. How is that helpful?
Psychologically, it's not helpful at all. It's not helpful for French victims of terrorism, and actually it's very dangerous in terms of perpetrating a cycle of violence. If the Muslim community is stereotyped and scapegoated as all possible terrorists, this can obviously create a situation where things become polarized, especially for adolescents, Muslim adolescents who are, in a fragile and vulnerable life stage. If they're feeling rejected, if they're feeling hated by the French community at large, this can be something in which they can then move psychologically to look for a strong identity. And here we could have the risk of radicalization, because in the radicalization process, the radical group is going to give them a strong identity and is going to say, that's fine if they hate us, because we hate them too.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, basically what happened with radicalization is typically that this group of people, it can be recruiters from Daesh, recruiters from Al-Qaeda, whatever, they are going to put a very strong message where there is some injustices or where there is some problem with the government. For example, they will put forward the international relations. They will say, okay, look, France is being very unjust with Syria or with Iraq or whatever. And then after, they will also put forward all these messages that French society is giving when you have all this polemic on political secularism, laïcité, and the polemics is very spotted on Muslim community here in France. Of course, the group like Daesh, the group like Al-Qaeda will use all this leverage that we are giving them in order to radicalize people and in order to recruit people.
I want to ask both of you a question that Luc raised there in his live from outside the Bataclan. That's the state of emergency. Karen, how has the state of emergency impacted the lives of French people? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it depends on the people. Some people feel safer with the state of emergency. Some people also feel much more scapegoated with the state of emergency. I can think of situations in which Muslim families, for example, can have specialized police units knocking down their door at 5 a.m, and in which children are terrified and so begin to see the police and representatives of the state as the bad guys and not as the people who are protecting us. So it moves back into this question of how do we use the tools we have to ensure safety for everyone without polarizing, scapegoating, which can then polarize groups and actually facilitate more radicalization.
And Asif, what are your views?
Well, I think there is state of emergency and state of emergency. State of emergency means whenever you have proof that someone is preparing something against France or is preparing a terrorist attack against France, you can go to their home and start this raid and everything at 5 a.m, who has his signification. They are doing this for some security reasons. But at the same time, when you make a balance and when you see what happened during this state of emergency, it has been 1 year now, and this state of emergency is becoming permanent. And do French people want to live in this permanent state of emergency? I don't think so. I think they want to go back to the normal. And just a last thing, it's just about these people who are also facing a very traumatic event when policemen gunned and armed, heavily armed, are coming into their house to do a raid, and they find out this person was simply a Christian, and he has nothing to do with everything is going on. So I think that resume all my point of view. There is state of emergency and state of emergency. We just don't want that it becomes permanent.
But the government feels today that it's necessary to extend the current state of emergency because the terror threat they feel is still strong. Talk us through that.
I mean, I think there is other way of processing with the terrorism. For example, I was having a very strong chat with Gilles de Kerchove, who is a European coordinator for a terrorist attack on a European level. So why we are not looking for some intelligence services at a European level? Why each country is keeping his intelligence with them, why we are not sharing it. So I think it's more depending on how we can coordinate ourselves better within the European level, not necessarily within the national level.
Okay, and I want to just pause. Asif Arif, just on the terror threat in France. We talked about safety there. Can the government in France ever really fully say we've conquered this terror threat? The Islamic State group will never ever be able to attack us in the same way they did on November the 13th.
I don't think any country can say that. I don't think any country can say that because the terror threat, it can happen anywhere, as Karen has mentioned it. I mean, you cannot say there is 100% security measure made by the government. Of course, you can say we will try and we will prevent everything in order to not have these type of attacks again. But I don't think you can ever, if a government is saying there is 100%, you're 100% secure in our country, that can only be a lie. I mean, that's impossible. That's impossible.
In the hours after these attacks a year ago, the French government decided to strike against the Islamic State group in their positions in Syria and in Iraq. Was that the best policy, do you think?
I don't think so, because the terrorist attack happened in France. So bombing in Syria, how it will change what happened in France? The terrorist attack was made by some French and Belgian national. So how bombing in Syria will help them to escape from these terrorists? I think that the way of to make a better France for tomorrow is the social support, but it's also support for the entire community. The entire community include religious community. So after the Paris attack, you have a lot of Muslims who also come in the front and say, we are with you. So this is the image that the government also need, to show that we are united and we are going to fight this extremist threat by this union. But I don't think going in Syria and bombing strategic position of Daesh or whatever, it can take place in some international policy, but it will not help to counterattack here in France.
And of course, is it fair to say that the threat has changed and this is no longer necessarily an organised group in one central place? This is lone wolves operating in small villages, towns, gathering together and deciding to attack?
I mean, that has been said and said again, when it happened with Nice, what happened after with the Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray as well, was this lone wolf movement, and Interpol in their last report were saying that Daesh has completely changed its strategy over Europe. They said now it's no more about farming people in the Middle East and sending them back in their native country, is they're forming them in their native country. And there is a big struggle on internet, I think, on this aspect, because there is a lot of material available on the internet that lone wolf can use in order to perpetrate attack. So I think the government can focus on these more on these materials that are present on Twitter, Facebook, or whatever social network we have on internet in order to counter these terrorist issues.
Do you think these attacks could have been prevented?
Well, we can rewrite the history as many times as we want. I mean, they can be prevent if maybe our security service, our intelligence services have seen this problem, and you mentioned it. I mean, DGSE, DST have seen these people coming, so why they don't arrest them? And if they arrest them, how they will deal with radicalized people in jail? So, you know, it's a circle problem. It's a circle problem where they will go to prison, they will get more radicalized, and then when they come out, what they will do, you know? So I think there is no magic formula about can we prevent this or can we prevent that. The magic formula today is to try to prevent every attack everywhere in France and in other countries with the material, of course, we have and within our capacity.
Okay, on that thought, I'd like to thank Asif Arif and Karen Sadlier for being with us here on the